We are a choice away from life or death every moment. You can live the avoidant life, or you can live the heroic life. This is it. What are you going to do with what you have?
Meet Andrew Daniel,
an award-winning author
and director at the Center for Cinesomatic Development.
The amazing thing about Cinesomatics, it's based on the principle of as above, so below. Also, in common parlance, how you do one thing is how you do anything. How you do anything is how you do everything. What we find out is that the way you show up in your body, the way you move through the space, is how you show up in your life. It is how you move through the world.
Welcome to another episode of Unlock Your Potential. This is Jeff Lerner, your host. Always so excited to be back with you, having yet another amazing conversation with another amazing human being. Today, we are joined by Andrew Daniel. He is an award-winning author, a spiritual teacher, and the director and founder of Cinesomatics and the Center for Cinesomatic Development, which I have learned enough about to know that I can't wait to learn a whole lot more about it because it's super cool. They use video feedback and movement to assess and resolve stuck somatic, psychological, and emotional patterns. They do this work all over the world. Obviously, it's done by video. It can be done virtually too. He's written a book. He's written multiple books. His latest book, Awaken to Your True Self, won the 2022 Gold Nautilus Book Award. And he's basically a stud, and we're glad he's here. I'm going to skip the rest of the bio because I really want to talk to him. Andrew, welcome to the show.
Jeff, thank you for having me. It's an honor.
Yeah, so glad you're here, man. I love it. I feel like I'm sort of finding a theme here. You know, there's a few sort of meta themes that are woven through this podcast across episodes. And one of them really is, although I've never heard the term cinesomatics, what draws me into that, and this has been something that's come up on other episodes too, is like the way that video can actually create a window into the self. Usually we think of video giving us a window into others, but it can also be such a useful tool to look within ourselves and see ourselves in some ways for the very first time. So, and I have a whole bunch of work I do with that at Entre that I can't wait to compare notes on, but I'm gonna let you, if you would, let's start at the beginning. I mean, who are you? How'd you get here? How'd you develop this work, and what's all the relevant backstory so we can get into the deep end here?
Yeah, I'll make it short because it's a whole life, but essentially the gist of it is how any of this led to my current life. When I was young, I dealt with a lot of bullying and teasing. When I was a toddler, I had warts on my hands, and that set into motion an entire 2 decades of victim mentality, right? Because it wasn't just bumps on my fingers. When I started school, people teased me for it. They made fun of me for it. And in fact, so much that they would tell their parents, oh yeah, there's this kid, he has these bumps on his hands. They're like, oh, don't touch him. You're going to get warts, right? It's contagious. It wasn't. But it kind of set into motion this sort of fear. And I didn't know it at the time, but I at some level used that to be a victim. I said, poor me, why me? What is wrong with me? I just want to love people. I'm just this little ball of love and light, and these people don't want me. Top that with a father when I was an infant hit me, and my mom had custody, and there was courts and attempted kidnapping and mafia, and they were 17, 18 years old. There was a lot of drama in the beginning of my life around that. I'm very blessed that my mother and my stepfather did love me tremendously and got us out of that situation. But at home, there was a lot of fighting. They were very young. Money was a big issue. A lot of yelling around money stuff. And at school, the bullying and the teasing continued. And that led me to, in my teenage years, being very angsty. My stepdad was essentially my dad. We butted heads a lot because he was just very like, do what I say because I said so. And I'm like, why? Tell me. And so there was a certain not against authority, but not a full trust in it. It didn't quite make sense. It just felt a little bit more tyrannical. Then at school, right, I was very intelligent. I had a very high IQ. That didn't help with fitting in. Raising my hand to answer the questions and people rolling their eyes, being exasperated because I knew the answer. And so there's just a lot of this stuff. All you could kind of start piecing together the psychology and the emotional state I was in. So I was pretty depressed. And I was essentially at the place where I started fantasizing about suicide and revenge, going in and to the schools and, seeking my revenge in certain ways. Very, very dark stuff. Crying myself to sleep. We call it FOMO now, fear of missing out. But, 20 years ago, being a kid and everyone else is having fun and invited to the parties except you. Using all of this stuff to suffer. I didn't realize it at the time. I do now. But at the time, I was just using all of these things to suffer. And this led me to a turning point. This led me to a choice point. Either I end it, find a way out of life, or I do whatever it takes to figure this out. How to have friends, not sit alone at lunch where people just throw food at me and laugh at me and trip me. To have girls like me, right, as a teenager, right? I loved girls. At my first crush when I was 6 years old, I screwed all of those up. Being needy, desperate, clingy, afraid, terrified, socially awkward, anxious, all this stuff. How do I figure that out? How do I live a life where I love myself, where I'm happy, where I don't look in the mirror and say, you're a piece of shit, you're a loser that nobody wants. And so it was that choice that I had to make. Either I end this or I do whatever it takes to figure this out. And I am here now, so it is clear that choice that I made. I chose to do whatever it took to figure this out. And so that got me onto the internet, literally typing in. I remember sitting at my computer, CRT monitor, the first few years of Google, how to be cool, how to make friends, how to get girls to like you. And of course, the stuff that came up was terrible. But I did find a few things that showed me that I could make a new choice and change something about myself that gave me hope. Right? I grew my hair out, and girls looked at me a little differently when I grew my hair out rather than cutting it short and spiking it up. And that, as superficial as these things were, what they did was give me real hope. Wait a minute. I just don't have to deal with what life gives me. I feel sorry for myself. There's something I can do about it. I didn't know to the extent of what I could do about it then, but at least it was enough to say, all right, something can be done. Something can change. And so that set me on the journey of the next, 16 years of personal development, transformation, healing, spirituality, and it even coincided with my entrepreneurship journey. I started a software company at 18 because at 14, I started learning web design and graphics and building computers. I liked video games, all that nerdy stuff that I was made fun of for then.
How old, can I ask how old you are?
I'm 36.
Okay, so that would have been 22 years ago, you started getting into that stuff. And then 18 years ago, you started a software company. That helps me contextualize this. When you were getting into the online dating stuff, did you ever come across a program called Double Your Dating by David D'Angelo?
David D'Angelo, yeah.
Okay, whose real name is Eben Pagan.
Eben Pagan, yeah.
Okay, so I've
done
I would say
his programs, yeah.
Okay, I would say I'm not like tight with Eben, but I mean I'm acquainted with him, and we have moved in similar circles in the past, and I always find that hilarious that he got his start with a dating course. So.
Yeah, it was actually the first thing I found.
Is that the thing that told you to grow your hair out?
No, that was a friend.
Okay.
but that was the thing that said you could actually show up differently. You didn't just have to be this pushover to get girls to like you. So I actually credit that part because his stuff was some he's grown a lot since then. I've taken some of his entrepreneurship stuff, which is fantastic. But it was enough to do something. And I actually was. Oh, this is really embarrassing, but I'm gonna say it.
Oh yeah, I'll match you with something embarrassing if you want, if it makes you feel better.
Okay. So when I was like 17, 18 years old, I saw one of these ads. It was, get women to go crazy for you. Try this pheromone spray. And I started learning about pheromones. Now there's actually some validity to pheromones themselves, but it's not like, oh, just spray this on and now girls are throwing themselves at you. But I started reading that. It was something. It was like, I was desperate. I was a desperate 17 years old. If I could spray something besides Axe on me to get girls to like me. And the interesting thing was, from that, there was a forum. There was an online forum about people that were interested in pheromones and cologne and perfumery. And so in one of those posts, they were talking to some guy, and he's like, yeah, I want girls and women to like me and this stuff. And there was one post that says, pheromones aren't going to do it. You have to work on yourself. You want to look, take a look at something by David D'Angelo or an XYZ. And I was like, who's that? So I searched that, Google, led me to his stuff. I got Double Your Dating, and then all of the programs. And that set me on a course of, there's this whole world that I don't have to just be a loser with women. I can learn this. This isn't just stuff that have to be born being a Casanova knowing. And so that gave me a lot of hope. I've learned a lot since then. But that was kind of my really embarrassing thing that actually led to something that I credit in some form of saving my life, or at least drastically changing it.
Well, I'll match you just as I said I would, that when I was probably in that same age, like certainly in my teens, by the way, like, let me just already say, totally align, bullied, super insecure with girls, totally, hit a crisis nexus of like either I change or what's the point. By the way, Albert Camus, one of my favorite, I don't know if it's one of my favorite quotes. I think it's one of the most insightful quotes I've ever heard is Albert Camus, the famous absurdist existentialist author, said, the only serious philosophical question is suicide, which is to say, because he's an absurdist, right? Life is absurd. You're either willing to deal with it or not. And if you're not, that's your answer. And if you are, you ain't got much to complain about because life is absurd. And how can you complain that absurdity is absurd, And so it's interesting. I mean, I'll actually say it's thematic of this show. I interview high performers. I interview a lot of entrepreneurs. I interview a lot of people that work very hard on themselves and are into self-development. And, by the way, I'll rattle off 3 names: Steve Jobs, Bill Gates, Elon Musk. What do they all have in common with both of us? Mercilessly bullied as kids. I think there's an archetype here: bullied and smart. And man, I almost view that is a bullied, smart, reach a point of crisis, willing to do what it takes to regain control of their life and their narrative, is actually part of the long-term success formula, I would say, based on a body of evidence of several hundred interviews I've done on this show.
It's a form of the hero's journey, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I had no interest of adventure, right? The call to adventure for me was, you figure this out or you're going to be a miserable piece of shit the rest of your life. You're going to kill yourself.
Hear, hear. Amen. Sad. And sadly, that is hundreds of millions of children's reality right now in the world. I have no doubt.
Yeah. And, if, just sharing this, I'm not big of a motivational, inspirational kind of person. I'm more of that's actually how we do stuff and heal stuff. But there is a place in the journey for it, right? In the beginning, there is a huge, tremendous value and validity to this inspiration and motivation, this hope. That's what I needed when I was depressed and suicidal. And that is very valid, very important. And I feel I share these stories. I'm not living them anymore for a while, but I share it now in a place where I feel like I have enough success, enough self-love, enough out of that to be an example, to just show people you can. It's a choice. Mm-hmm. I know it doesn't seem like it, but I've walked this walk. I'm not just talking the talk, and it's possible for you. It's possible for everyone. And it's okay if you don't choose it. It's okay if you do. But there is hope. There is something you can do. Knowing no one's coming to rescue you. Right, there's that quote, I forget who it is, but if it's meant to be, it's up to me kind of thing. And it doesn't mean
sounds like Napoleon Hill. We'll give it to him.
Yeah, something like that. And it doesn't mean you have to do it alone. It doesn't have to mean you isolate. It doesn't mean that no one's there to support you and help you. But it does mean that at the end of the day, it's your choice. It's up to you. You have free will. I have free will. I could have felt sorry for myself, and I did. For 20 years, I felt sorry for myself until I didn't, until I said, oh, you know what? This is how I abandoned myself. This is how I betrayed myself. This is how I took it personal. This is how I stayed bitter and resentful rather than forgiving. I can make new choices from that. And that's where you start.
So I didn't actually finish my embarrassing confession.
Okay.
No, which is my fault because I do what I do a lot, which is start something and then take a detour. But no, it was my multiple orders, multiple times that I was a customer of Kevin Trudeau's infomercials.
Oh, yeah.
I'm sure you remember him.
Yeah.
But my mistake when I was young, I was very intelligent. I always, scored highly on exams and whatnot. It was the only thing I actually felt confident about. And I did recognize that the cool kids didn't seem to think it was that cool. But at the end of the day, it was like one thing I could hang my hat on.
Yeah.
And so I started ordering. When I was a kid, I would see, and it was actually prior to teens, I was probably like 10 or 11, whenever it was, I would see these infomercials of like how to give yourself a photographic memory or how to, improve your cognition, whatever. And so I used my parents' credit card and ordered multiple Kevin Trudeau infomercials. And to this day, the only thing I remember learning from Kevin Trudeau's infomercials, he was using like image-based memory, like mnemonic tricks. And for some reason, the only thing that lodged in my brain is that the French word for strawberry is pamplemousse, I think.
Uh-huh.
And I did retain that 30 years later, but that was it, though. Anyways, so sorry, I just had to get that out. So now I'm embarrassed too. And let's keep talking about when you decide that you're not going to die and instead you're going to live and you make choices in that direction, what actually happens from there?
Well, you set out on the adventure of a lifetime.
By the way, the closest literal translation of the French word entrepreneur is the English word adventurer.
Really? I didn't.
Yeah, technically it means undertaker, like one who undertakes a journey or an endeavor, an adventure. But in English, undertaker means like something to do with death. Is that the Grim Reaper? Like what is an undertaker?
I think it's the one that when you're getting your beheaded.
Like the executioner is like the undertaker.
Oh, yeah, maybe that's executioner.
Well, we know it has to do with death.
It's something,
and that's
something unfun.
So the closest approximation is actually adventurer. That's literally like I own a platform, Entre Institute, and we evangelize and we teach and we support and nurture and develop entrepreneurship and entrepreneurialism as a way of life. But it's not just about starting businesses. It's about deciding that my life is going to be an adventure. And I'm going to choose my own adventure through my choices, my decisions, my behaviors, my commitments, and so forth, my attitudes, my beliefs. And for most people, because life is so hardwired to the pragmatic financial element, there is very often a business ownership or investing or some sort of self-directed financial choice intrinsic to the decision to live an adventure. But that's actually what we mean by entrepreneurship, is like a life of adventure. So now you have a little context on me.
Well, and I think too why that money component is in, because money is currency, money is energy, an exchange of energy. Why do we do that? Well, value. And so when you're on the hero's journey, if Joseph Campbell's hero's journey, I studied a lot of his work, and the hero's journey at the end of it, basically what you do, like almost the second to last step, is the elixir. And so you find the elixir, aka value, aka a solution to a problem, aka the manifestation of your gifts to the world, right? But then the last step is bringing it back to the village. Right? You bring the elixir back to the village to help people. So it's a hero's journey that's all about yourself until it's not, because it's not really about you. Because if you don't share those gifts with the world, right, you're hoarding it. It starts to degrade, right? People that are hoarding, if you look at these archetypes, it's kind of this Scroogey. They contract inward versus people that are sharing their gifts, that are getting their stuff out to be of value to people. Whether that value is entertainment, hope, food, business solutions, SaaS software, whatever it is. So I think that the money aspect of the adventure aspect is part of it, because there is this intrinsic, there's a reason you're on the adventure. Yes, it's just to have the adventure. And if you're in that place, you're learning, you're growing. And then you take whatever that is, whether it's any of the things I just listed, back to the village, society, your family, whoever it is. And that intrinsically, I think, results in money in modern times.
So, actually, I think I feel like it's probably safe to assume most people have not gone as in-depth on the hero's journey as you and myself, because most people don't have businesses that are designed around helping facilitate people through their transformational journey. So maybe we should double click on the hero's journey for the audience. I'm a big student of Joseph Campbell as well. Yeah. So and you do, well, I'd actually rather you explain. I mean, you do a lot of work with archetypes and stuff. I mean, it's essential. Well, I'll let you say it.
Yeah. The gist of it is essentially, you're in the he draws it kind of as a circle. So you're in the ordinary world, right? This is, if you look at Star Wars, he actually worked with Joseph Campbell. So the whole Star Wars, it's the hero's journey.
And by the way, I just want to declare, I mean, the reason this is so important, maybe to set a little context for the audience, you might be like, well, why, this is one guy's theory. No, so if you look at Maslow's hierarchy, you look at the spectrum of human needs, the hero's journey is, to me, that theory applied in the context of an actual life arc. The hero's journey takes you through all the way through self-actualization. And like you said, turning around and abundantly sharing gifts with the world. So the hero's journey is how you live a complete Maslowian life to end your life fulfilled and without regret. That's why it's important to me.
Yeah, well, it's the story of humanity. If you look at it, it's not like he said, I think this is how things are, and let's try this theory out. He studied thousands and thousands of myths and stories. It was an emergent. It was the emergent archetypical path through countless stories, countless generations, all different cultures. The same kind of path played itself out, and it wasn't just applicable to writing movies or books. It was the human experience. It's like there's other aspects to it, but this is really, everyone understands this. Everyone can relate to it in its own way, whether it's the hero's journey in your family or being a king and an emperor. It shows up in all ways.
Yeah. And I took us a little off course. So yeah, you're in the ordinary world.
Yeah.
You feel a call.
Yes, you're in the ordinary world. Something happens and there's this call, right? So for me, it was, right, well, either I'd kill the ordinary world was suffering. And so this is the spiritual aspect too, right? The ordinary world, like in Buddhism, is suffering. And so how do you take yourself out of suffering? So there's the call to adventure. Then there's, I don't have it all memorized, but essentially call to adventure. And then you meet somebody, right? You have a mentor, you have a wizard, you have, an uncle. And then there's some guidance. And
typically as part of the journey, you feel the call, but you wrestle with it. You usually resist it at first because society has this inertia over here that says, no, don't go off the track. Like you'll live a life of chaos and destruction. Stay on the
real
track.
Job. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And by the way, for me, I remember it. I literally remember the moment. I was sitting in an abandoned music building on a campus of a boarding school that I had to enroll in because I'd gotten expelled the previous year from my high school. It was this fall semester of my junior year. It was an empty music building because they had built a new one. And so they weren't having any classes. And there was a piano sitting in this abandoned room. And I had this voice that said, Jeff, you are going to have to get a real job someday unless you do something creative or expressive or something that can fulfill you and still put food on the table. And that is why you now find yourself in an empty building with nothing but a piano. And I began a journey of teaching myself to play the piano. 6 months later, I dropped out of high school and went to live a decade as a jazz musician. And anyway, so that was my call. I remember the moment.
Yeah. The get a real job. It's like, what does it even mean? Anyway, so there's this, so you have the call to adventure, then you wrestle with it. You're in contrast with the society, the expectations of society yourself. Again, paraphrasing it, you have some meeting with a mentor. You're exposed to something new. Then you go down into the underworld, which is, the shadow, the subconscious, the dark night of the soul, right? You're facing your demons, the dragons, right? There's this whole adventure in the place that you've never been. You leave home, right? So you leave home, and that's the old way of thinking. That's the college degree and the safe job, whatever it is. Then you go on this whole adventure. All these different things happen. You're sometimes, there's the magical aid, right? Something comes in. It's a voice, right? It's an angel. It's a goddess. It's a woman. It's maybe a teacher, whatever it is, right? There's this supernatural force beyond your ego. That's the important thing. It's beyond yourself. It's beyond the kind of mortal, normal realm. And then you kind of face the boss, right? There's that final boss, that confrontation with it. You are diving into the depths. You recover that elixir, the lesson, whatever it is that we talked about. Then it's the race back. Then you have to it's like in Aladdin. He gets the lamp, and then the Cave of Wonders is caving in, and it's that race. He's on the magic carpet, escaping it. So you've got the elixir, you've beat the demon, you've came to face with it, but you have to get out of the underworld. You have to make it back. Not everybody makes it back. They find the thing, but they don't have what it takes or whatever it is to bring it to market, right? To actually publish the book, bring it to market, and then to the village, right? Then you share it with the village and actually have a product that people are using and sustain that. So that's kind of a bastardized version of it, but you get the idea.
Yeah, and it's so interesting to me because I'm a big Ayn Rand fan, and I know that she's controversial now, and she's associated with certain things that are, I don't think, actually even relevant to associate her with. But I will say Ayn Rand, reading The Fountainhead, is what set me on my hero's journey. But the thing I really, really resonate with Ayn Rand around is all of her language and discussion around tribalism and tribes. And, she says, and she uses some politically incorrect language where she talks about like the savage and the savage tribesmen, kind of like older, antiquated cultures and whatnot. But she's saying basically the savage's existence is entirely ruled by the mores of the tribe. And there's no heroism allowed. The tribe demands conformity. The tribe demands systematization, shared responsibility to maintain the social apparatus and the economic apparatus. And like, we're all just now the tribe has gotten bigger. We're in the global tribe, but tribes are started by heroes. Like critical moments of tribal existence are determined by heroes. Tribes are usually ended by heroes in a process of creative destruction that moves society forward to the next thing. You could literally sum it up by saying heroes, the people that take this journey, are all the people that matter in the grand narrative. And everybody else, if you just stay in the tribe, like Ayn Rand said, civilization is the process of setting man free from men. In other words, setting the hero free from the tribe is how I interpret that. And that is why I spend my life now calling people to a life of entrepreneurialism, because frankly, whether it's owning a business or not, it's about living an adventure or else dying a functional gear in the machine that is the tribe, full of regret because you never fulfilled your destiny.
And you see that those gears are that machine is necessary for the hero's journey. If there was no,
it's the resistance.
Yeah, well, if there's no resistance, if there's no norm, how could you, be called to adventure, right? So it's it's amazing how the whole thing, you can't have one without the other, right?
Is it so? Could I ask like a philosophical, like underpinned question to that? Because I totally agree. It's like the ultimate paradox of earthly terrestrial existence is that the norm is essential to create the context within which we can live a hero's journey. But the hero's journey is a call to break away from the norm. And if everybody heeded the hero's journey, then there would be no norm to break away from, and there would be no heroism. It's kind of like the contrast of light and dark. But I'm curious, do you believe that there are some who are called to the hero's journey, while there are others, perhaps the majority, whose actual purpose in life is to constitute the norm? Or is everyone called to the hero's journey, but because of, let's say, some larger spiritual design or war going on, there are many who will simply be absorbed and constrained to within and to define the norm against their own calling, so to speak?
A question asked from someone who is a hero.
See, I'll share my point of view, but I want yours first.
This question, right? A normal person want to ask this question. So this isn't an attack. This is a compliment, right? So this is a question of somebody who feels this hero's journey a part of life to them, and who's it's in them to be this. And so you're like, well, doesn't everybody want to start a business?
I wrestle with this question a lot. I mean, Call of the Wild was my favorite book as a kid. You know, like I've always felt it.
Yeah.
And it blows my mind when I meet people that don't, in my words, act like they don't, or have suppressed it and numbed it to the point where perhaps they're no longer aware of it. But I don't, it's hard for me to believe that everybody didn't feel it at some point in their life.
Yeah. Well, you know, it could very be possible that's the hero's journey for them is to become someone who wants to have a hero's journey, right? Mm-hmm. They're in it, right? So it's like there's a lot here, and I've thought about this. I don't have any answers. I have some ideas from different philosophies. All right, so let's think about one. If we're under let's look at the organism ecology model of oneness. All right, so if we're all one, it doesn't matter, right? If let's say we go into this idea that we're all one anyways, there's a part of me that is doing this. There's a part of me that's doing this. There's a part of me playing the villain. There's a part of me that's playing the hero. There's a part of me playing the NPC, the non-player character, you know, making the coffee, whatever it is. Then we start looking at that and say, okay, well, it doesn't matter. Like, these are all part of the experience. I like to apply it to the body. Now, if we think that the heart, or let's say the head, or the genitals, or the hands, like if we pick a part of the body that we think is the most important part of the body, we're like, well, doesn't the liver want to be the brain? Like, doesn't the feet feel bad that he's not the heart? And I think that is a very kind of normal way that we think about this in our Western mind. I don't think it's true, because the heart is just as valuable as the liver. They all have the same value. It's our certain alignments or associations or projections of which is more. You couldn't have a human without the fifth toe, right? It would be a different thing. And so I've actually, even in my work, this actually brings it into the work that I do, the embodiment piece, is there's literally parts of my body that I've mapped out. I'm like, my pinky toe? Okay. But there's something in the pinky toe symbolically that is there for a reason. It's plugged into something. And so when I don't have that pinky toe, what might it equate to? Well, balance. Okay. Well, I'm out of relationship with this balance aspect in my life. So the reason I'm bringing this up, the point is if we look at society, it wouldn't be humanity if it was any different, right? So then it comes to this idea that everything is here for a purpose. You couldn't have the hero without the villain. You couldn't have the call to adventure without the mundane. And so to your question, well, doesn't everybody? I would like to think so. I would like to think that if you think, well, then this is another theory. If you go into the theories of multiple lifetimes, parallel lifetimes, multi-universe kind of theory where every decision makes a new decision, everything everywhere all at once, this whole kind of thing, you can start looking at it that way. So I'm going to kind of pause there because this could become a whole 5-hour conversation.
Well, it's interesting because, I mean, that philosophical, that question posed by Camus, it's crazy how all this stuff interconnects. I posted this on Facebook or on Instagram at, let's see, what time was it? I don't know, 4:00 this morning or something. I said, the most important choice we ever make, one, will I bend my principles to the life I want to live? Or will I bend my life to the principles I want to live?
Yeah. And
I feel like in a metaphorical sense, that is actually Camus' question not about to live or die, but to live, to survive, or to truly live.
Yeah.
And so it's like, I feel like there is this call, and I feel like the great spiritual question, the spiritual existential crisis that is given to every person is, like, to use your metaphor, is like, hey, we are all called to be a heart or a head or something that is essential to the human narrative, but also the body needs toes, and the world needs people that don't heed the call to do, let's call them, less critical functions in the spiritual sense of life. And so, but like, that whole idea that the battle between good and evil is played out every single day in the heart of every single individual on earth, that fundamentally, whether we choose to heed that call or not, like, yeah, the world is constructed on the expectation that some will choose one way, most will choose another way, but it still comes down to the individual. And that's why I resonate so much with Ayn Rand, is it's like we abdicate our autonomy, we're almost like Calvinists. We abdicate ourselves to this predestination of the collective, not necessarily predestination of God, but just predestination of society. Most people, childhood is a process of abandoning dreams and giving over our future to decisions that have been made for us by the collective.
Yeah.
We're all called not to do that. That's why kids dream and kids act out and kids rebel and kids are kids.
Yeah.
But it just gets beaten out of most of us, and most of us end up a pinky toe and not a heart. But that doesn't mean that we should have.
Yeah. Well,
but also I try not to walk around judging pinky toes and saying, well, I chose to be a heart and you should have, and now you're missing out. And that's where it's like hard. I don't want to be like that.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. That's what I was saying earlier. In the opposite sort of way, is that there's as much validity in the pinky toe than as the heart. It's our egos that thinks one is more important than the other. And when you say, oh, without the pinky toe, without the NPC, this would be a completely different experience. So the pinky toe defines you as a heart. If there's no pinky toe, there wouldn't be a heart.
There's nothing to pump blood to, right? If you don't have other body parts.
Yeah. And then, so it's this, it's our own, because I've struggled this with huge, and I had this terror of being a background character in life.
Yeah.
Right? There was this, like, I wanted to be not the star, but I wanted to be a lead character. I wanted to be a main character in my own life. And most people aren't. Most people are not the main characters in their own life. It's a celebrity. It's their dad's judgment, right? It's their mom's expectation.
Man, we are hitting on such critical stuff. This is why, like, celebrity worship, this is why I hate reality TV. Because it's literally people living their own calling vicariously through someone else.
Yes.
And accepting the fact that they're not doing it for themselves. I think this is why sports are so hard for me. I love sport. I love athletics. I like watching LeBron James do what he does. But this idea of I'm going to give up so much of my time to watching other people living their childhood dreams is just, it's all so hard for me. It's
Well,
like
this-
at the level of ego,
Yeah.
I struggle with it a lot because I do not want to be like supercilious. I want to think that my pastimes and interests are no better than anybody else's,
Sure. Yeah.
but I also get really antsy when people want to watch football.
Yeah. Yeah. It's, well, I think there's multiple things there, right? I think one of it is our own, we probably at some level, in some way share this in common, right? This fear, this terror that life's going to pass us by. We're a background character. We didn't matter, right? That this is pointless, that we didn't actualize ourselves because we have that. We want that for everyone else. And I think on a spiritual level, this is why I do the work that I do, right? That I wrote my book to help people that want to actualize, that want this stuff. But it's not for everybody. Not everybody is there yet. And this comes back to, is it for everybody? Well, I think so. I think that through multiple, maybe lifetimes, if that's what it is, I don't know. I don't like to think that way because it puts it off into the future.
Mm-hmm.
Like, this is all you have. This is your life. Are there maybe multiple lives? Yeah, whatever. But this is it. What are you going to do with what you have? And are you going to live vicariously through other people because you're, whatever the reason is? And in my book, I have a chapter called The Avoidance of Life. And this is one of the huge things I find. You can live the avoidant life or you can live the heroic life. Now, you and I have had a life experience where we've made that transition, where we've lived and are living the heroic life, which is simply, are you going into your fears? Are you going into the adventure? Are you going into the unknown? Or are you avoiding things? Are you avoiding feeling uncomfortable? Are you avoiding your bills? Are you avoiding responsibilities? That's really just the difference. What I've discovered is that the people that live the avoidant life are in tremendous suffering. They're avoiding feeling all of the things they don't want to feel. They're avoiding facing the things they don't want to face. They're avoiding standing for their principles, right? They're avoiding speaking up. They're avoiding things rather than facing things. And it doesn't matter if you succeed. It doesn't matter if you're doing a pinky toe adventure or you're doing a hard adventure. Are you facing it? Are you going into life or are you going out of life? And if you look at a lot of these early religions, these different phases throughout history, there's people that have rejected life, right? People that reject life, the people that, the pacifists, the people that will not eat anything unless it's fallen onto the ground and decaying, the people that are sweeping the bugs out from their path so they don't step on them. These people have retracted from life. There's a symbol called the Ouroboros. It's a serpent eating its own tail.
Right.
One of the things it symbolizes is that life eats life. And this comes back to your quote of life is absurd. And life eats life. It's horrific. I think Schopenhauer said life is something that should not have been. This is horrific. Life that eats, we have to eat and kill other living organisms, whether plants, insects, animals, whatever it is, in order to keep living. Everything does in some way. Even plants, they take nutrients in certain ways. There's carnivorous plants. So understanding that we can either go into life, we can either go into the call to adventure. For some people is just waking up every day and showing up to life. Are you going to show up to the world? Are you going to face the absurdity of life, or are you going to say no to it? Are you going to reject it? Are you going to hide? Are you going to watch people do what you wish you could do, but you're too afraid to do? It's one way to be. But I will tell you that when you call to adventure, you may die, you may fail, you may have tremendous pain, you may be rejected. In fact, all of those things in some form will happen. But you're standing for your principles. Like you said, you're living life to those principles. You're showing up. That is not going to be a life of suffering. You will have pain, but it doesn't mean you suffer. When you live an avoidant life, on the other hand, when you reject, when you avoid, when you do not show up to your life and to your principles, I have not seen a single client come in who's doing that, who isn't suffering.
Yeah.
So the heroic life doesn't guarantee success, but the avoidant life guarantees suffering. And so it's which bet are you going to place? Are you going to show up to life, or are you going to avoid it?
Hey there, real quick. I just wanted to let you know, I have been concentrating a lot lately on providing tons of value to my text message community. This could be random thoughts. This could be letting you be the first to know about an event I'm planning or a special I'm running or a free training I'm hosting. Anyway, just shoot me a text to get subscribed. The number is 702-996-3926. Thanks so much. Let's get back to the podcast.
Yeah. I feel like there is that. I mean, Camus said it's the only serious philosophical question. I might challenge him that I think there's a second equally serious question, depending on your answer to the first, which is, okay, now what do I value most? If assuming I make the choice to live, what then do I value most? Either life itself or something else. And what I mean by that is, if you decide, okay, live or die, I choose to live. Now, survive or truly live. Survive is, I value staying alive above all things, which biologically, that's how our brains are wired. Our amygdala is saying, don't die, don't take the risk, don't do the thing. And if we decide, having chosen to live, that simply staying alive is now the most important thing. And by the way, a lot of I think the most insidious, and the reason it's so insidious is because it's so intertwined with so many wonderful things that it hides and it's easy to miss. The most insidious way that this happens to us is through family. Because it's like, well, I got to take care of my kids. I got to be a provider. I have responsibilities. And so I will literally trade my potential. I will trade my hero's journey. I will trade my calling. I will trade my purpose. I will trade my destiny. I will trade all of it to be a provider for my kids, because that's how we live. That's how we outlive ourselves, is through our offspring. And so, and by the way, we perpetuate it then, because then we model it for our kids, who are then themselves willing to make the same sacrifice. And now multi-generationally, we've conscripted ourselves into a life of not living, not truly living. Or if you make the other choice, like you said, intrinsic to that choice is a possibility of death. And it's like, people might think this is all dramatic and extreme. That's just because we live in a time that is so optimized around human comfort that for most of us, we never actually have to face those moments. But deep down, I think most people know, am I a person that would die for a principle or not?
I was homeless twice. For most people, they can never imagine being homeless. They would never do anything. I was homeless twice in order to follow my vision. Now, did I have to do it? Did I have a lot of ego involved? Did I have a lot of wacky shit wrapped up with that? Yes. But I was willing to do that. And for most people, they're not. And so I don't have that fear now. But the reason I say this is what you said about what do you value more, life or living? If you value, in what you said, if you are afraid to live because you value life more than living, the truth is you actually value death more than life. Because when you're living, you're truly alive. You're actually living life. When you're afraid to do that because you want to live, it actually means death runs you more than life runs you.
Yeah.
Yeah, but we use those words, we hide out. We use them to hide out.
So that might be that's really interesting that if we're using death, let's say sort of like metaphorically, quasi, semantically here, to represent almost like the shadow inversion of life. It's like, it's the life not fully lived is actually a form of almost like delayed and amortized death over time. then there's this, which like truly, I'm so freaking glad we're having this conversation. This is shit I think about all the time. I don't really think about like how to optimize my Facebook ads or how to like get more customers. Yeah. Like that's all just like the details that have to happen to get the message out. But this is what I'm trying. I'm desperately, for some reason, I feel called to enroll people, to invite people, or at least to illustrate for people this way of being in the world that is truly in this world, but not of this world. Right. Because this world is in many ways death presented to us as life, to sort of use your metaphor.
Yeah.
But then let's talk maybe about the shadow. I know you do a lot of work with the shadow, and this has been an amazing conversation. I want to give you ample space still to sort of talk about how you apply this in the world, right? Not just us with, coffee shop talk here, but like the shadow and the way that you use, I know that your Cinesomatics is like, you almost created a mechanism for people to be able to bring their perspective or their position on these types of existential questions to the surface, even though for most people, they're not even asking the questions consciously.
Yeah. It's this is a great transition. You said something really cool. I never really put it that way, that death could almost be like the shadow, something like the shadow of life kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Well, in my work, we do shadow work that you just talked about. And what I like about what you said is that, so when I'm working with clients, I'm not helping them become more dysfunctional and evil and bad. I'm helping them become, right, more functional, more loving, more beauty, more peace, more joy, all that stuff. In order to do that, they need to be in relationship with all of those shadow aspects. And so when you said death is kind of the shadow of life, I connected that and say, oh, well, if you want to have access to a fully alive life, you need to be in relationship with death.
Yeah.
And this is
which, by the way, the Buddhists say, live with death on your shoulder.
Yeah. Well, and they also have the monks, the Buddhist monks, they used to have skulls in their monasteries to remind them that there's death. They even had monasteries where the stairs were built by bones, the constant reminder of this grin of death. It's coming. It's here. No one escapes it. And so you find that when you actually are more in relationship with death, which seems counterintuitive to a terrified ego. No, I want all the life stuff. Let me hold on to life. This is going to keep me more alive. But if you go into death, not die, but if you go into symbolic death, right? People that have done psychedelics or high spirituality, they have ego deaths.
Yeah.
You go into the death, you get into relationship with this, and you come out of it and you find that you can actually live life much better because this isn't running you anymore. You're not terrified of it. And so when we apply this to the work that people come in and do this stuff with, the amazing thing about Cinesomatics is that we don't just talk about it. We actually see this play through someone's body. Is that these shadow aspects come up in their body, and I say, all right, well, in your body, show me these things. Then we film it with high-end cinema equipment or online. Then we play this video back of their embodied movement, and then I give them feedback on all of the subconscious archetypes, stories, mythologies, blocks, shadow material that arise through the movements of their body. And then they get to see it for themselves on video. So it's not just blindly trusting a therapist, a guru, an expert, or whatever. You get to see it for yourself in your own body, how all of this stuff is running you on video for yourself. And this creates an entire feedback loop, which allows you to start penetrating it and healing it and resolving it. But by making, and this is Carl Jung's quote that I have in my book, until we make the unconscious conscious, we will call it fate and it will direct our lives. And that's what we're doing here. This is a modality where we can literally, not California Valley Girl literally, but literally make this unconscious conscious. We bring it from the underworld. We go into the underworld. We do this movement, having people move in ways that to them feel bad or wrong or terrifying or judgmental or whatever it is. Then we bring it up to the surface to look at. And in that process, there's tremendous healing. So at the end of the book, I have a Latin phrase, which basically means we go into the shadows to find the light of lights. So it's this hero's journey. We're going in these sessions, in these ways, into the person themselves, into their own body to see the things that are running them. We bring it to the surface and it reveals something that would run their life. We go in and say something like, all right, do you see how you're abandoning yourself? You're betraying yourself because you want the love and approval of your parents. If you keep doing this, look at what's going to happen. So this work, not only can we see what happens in their past, but it's a really good predictor of their future unless they make new choices. And so everything we've been talking about here, I've been able to verify on video in people's bodies with money in the bank account, with real numbers, with real results, how everything that we've been talking about is true. It is not theory. I have people, clients, hundreds of people coming in doing this that shows, that reveals these are principles within humanity throughout all cultures. They're real. They're not philosophies and theories. They're real. And the things that don't work, I say, oh, that's not true. Oh, this spiritual idea that people are peddling, when you like cutting out your bad parts, ignoring the shadow, everything is only love and light, rainbows, unicorns, and nobody does anything bad at all. That doesn't work. I'm seeing it right here. People that do that are in a fantasy. They're disconnected with the shadow aspect. They're dangerous. So all of these things that we've studied and learned and meditated on and have been passed down, this is actually a method through the body, through video, through real world results. We're able to verify what is true, what principle actually works in life. I don't care what society says. I don't care what a study says. I don't care what a guru says. This is the evidence right in front of me that this works or this doesn't.
So I want to share with you the caption that I put on this post. Again, the post was the most important choice we ever make. 1, will I bend my principles to the life I want to live? Or 2, will I bend my life to the principles I want to live? Obviously, the hero's journey is a journey toward number 2, let's call it, right? That's where, again, we feel the call you could say is a call of principle. The mentor is a guide of principle. The test, the tribulation is a challenge to principle, right? Like principle or values, you could
what you stand for. Yeah.
Yeah. Which, by the way, I'm so glad you said that. What you stand for. The word purpose comes from the original French word for propose. It's actually proposer, to propose something. Your purpose is what you propose to the world. It's what you stand for.
Oh, that's great. Yeah.
But I wrote the caption said, my favorite irony of life is that number 2 is more likely to lead to what number 1 is after.
Yeah.
That those that will stand for principle and be willing to compromise their life circumstances are actually far more likely to achieve the life circumstances that those that are making that their primary goal are seeking. And I would use myself as an example. I have a way better, superficially, I have a way better life than I ever expected to, or probably than I deserve. And I'm not saying that I am like the ultimate example of somebody standing for principle, but I have made a few bold choices in my life on principle. For example, dropping out of high school because I wanted to prioritize freedom over money. And I saw school as just long form job training. And, a few other things that people have said, you're reckless, you're nuts.
Yeah.
They were just part of my adventure. They were heeding a call, right? So, and now I have a lot to show. We go, see, I don't know. I guess there's something to it. But the reason I say all that is I'm trying to connect a number of dots you've given. This idea that life eats life, the snake eating its tail, the Ouroboros, the Schopenhauer quotes. If part of life is the consumption and the destruction of life, then clearly the purpose of life is not to simply blindly preserve life, which is so like there's an implicit pointer toward how to answer that second question of, do I live simply to stay alive, or do I risk death to do something greater than simply staying alive that's based on principle or whatnot? And given that all life only exists by destroying itself, that's probably a pretty good indicator, and that everyone's going to eventually lose the battle not to die. That's probably a pretty good suggestion that there is something else that is more important. And that I would argue that reconciling that, again, it's all built into the etymology. It's all built into the language. That's our purpose. It's to find that which we will stand for. I always think about the scene in City Slickers. I don't know. You ever seen that movie, Billy Crystal?
Long time ago, yeah.
Yeah, and Jack Palance at the end of the movie, he says to Billy Crystal, he says, the key to life is one thing. And Billy says, what's that? And he says, that's what you got to figure out. But there's one thing for everybody. It's the key to life. And I promise this. Okay, actually, I don't want to say I promise. I want to ask. I want to ask you. My belief, because again, I'm in a unique position. I run an entrepreneurial education platform. I get to ask. I have a process that asks thousands and thousands of people about the purpose of their life and their core beliefs and why they do what they do and what they're striving for. And the number one thing that I get as people's why they do what they do is for their families. I swear that's the trick of the devil. There is something bigger. It doesn't mean we don't love the shit out of our families and we want them to have heroic, epic adventures too. But the goal is not just to keep everybody alive, ourselves and our offspring who keep our genes alive, even if we die. There is something greater, and that we get bogged down in this. I got to do it for my family in exchange for doing it for myself. And I think that the call, the true call, is to find a way to align. I make the world a better place. I make my family a thriving, purposeful embodiment of calling. And I give my gifts to the world, and that I'm willing to die in the fight to make that true rather than settle.
Yeah, I think one of the important distinctions, because I've been hearing you say that, and there was something that I didn't quite, that was a little off, but now I get it. What I feel you're talking about is martyring yourself for your family, using your family to hold you back, using them as an excuse for you living an avoidant life.
And teaching your kids to do the same in the process.
Exactly, yeah. Which I think is an important distinction between making your life not just about you and serving your family.
Totally, yeah.
And, there's a doing it for your family, right? I'm doing this not just for my own ego to be a big famous star or entrepreneur or whatever it is. I'm doing it for my family. But what's the line between that and martyring yourself? What's the line between that and now using your family as a shield against your principles, against your cowardice, against your avoidance? So I think for me, getting that distinction, because it also doesn't work when you just go live a life for yourself. You say, fuck family, I'm just going to do what I want. That doesn't work either. And we know that doesn't, we know both don't work. Why?
Right.
Because one, when you abandon yourself, betray yourself, martyr yourself, and use other people to hold you back, there's resentful, right? There's resentment. You feel suffering. There's a contraction in your life. Now, we also know it doesn't work being narcissistic, making your life just about you. I talk about this in my book. Your life is not just about you. And if you live your life just for yourself, well, what are one of your principles, right? Myself above everyone else. Well, we know that doesn't necessarily lead to everything, because if everybody did that, everything would just crumble, things would just stop. Society would not continue. You did this great example. You used it in kind of in the way you said it made sense in training generations to stay small. But then there's also another way of, well, it does keep people alive. And if we can align with that truth without the martyring, without the avoidance, as you were talking about, without the cultural entrainment, the conditioning, the tall poppy syndrome, the crabs in the bucket, all of this stuff. You can move past that and live our life beyond just ourselves and move our family forward, move society forward, move ourselves forward. All of that together. Well, what does that do for people? When you go beyond yourself for someone else, what do we feel? We feel inspired. We feel moved. Our heart expands. All these Hallmark movies, right? All the movies we see, somebody sacrifices themselves. Somebody betrays their life. They betray their superficial life for a higher principle. It goes back to exactly what you said, or just said in a different way, right? The principle of other, the principle of being noble, virtuous.
It's human love. It's like agape.
Love.
The principle of
Yeah.
surrendering one's own short-term self-interest to the nurturing of our fellow man, which to me is an embodied acknowledgement that we are all one, we're all connected. And that's where that's why I love is how we operationalize God or spirit in the world.
Yeah.
I mean,
And so how do we do that without everything that you said, right? Without the martyrdom, without using it to hold back, because there's that line. And so this is actually a really interesting thing, again, about cinesomatics that has saved my life and a lot of clients, is that let's say you're doing this in your life. Let's say you think you're living your life for other people. And I say, all right, show me. In your body, show me, what does living your life for other people look like? Sometimes what we will see is them being of service in their community, being very helpful, and it feels amazing. It's like, wow, you are very generous. Other times, guess what we'll see? We'll see them martyring themselves. Oh, here you go. Oh, right? We'll actually see them leaving their body for other people. That doesn't work. And so through Cinesomatics, we can actually help people see, which one are you doing? Are you living for principles, or are you hiding behind a facade of principles and manipulating and martyring and abandoning yourself? And so it's a really life-changing, empowering way to discern that. Because how do you know, right? What's that line between your life is not just about you and now you're martyring yourself for other people, right? A lot of people struggle with that.
Yeah, this is, again, I reference Ayn Rand. I mean, she has a book called The Virtue of Selfishness, which is basically what you're saying. It's like, don't lose yourself to give of yourself.
Yeah.
Stay within yourself. Stay true. It's like the whole, like, when the oxygen masks fall down in the airplane, you put your own on first, because that's the only way you can help people. Ditto, the best, nobody can help the poor by being one of them.
Right. Yeah.
Right. And so forth. So yeah, this is, man, we have gotten deep into the grounding of my existence, Andrew. I am so grateful for this conversation. Thank you. I also know we've gone 10 minutes longer than we were scheduled. Are you okay on time?
Yeah. This is fine. Oh, I'm riled up. I'm just getting started.
So talk a little bit more then. Let's maybe go like 5 more minutes.
Okay.
And I want to give you some space, whether it's to talk about any of the critical principles from your book. Obviously, I want you to share how people can come find you and get into your world and explore your work and so forth. But so whether it's the book or more about cinesomatics, maybe at the very least, if you could help people really understand the cinesomatics concept a little deeper. You can tell I'm a word nerd. I'm connecting cine and somatics. Somatic meaning like of the body, separate from the mind. But how is the body?
Cinema, video. Yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah. So, anyways, please, if wherever you want to go, but share.
So first off, a lot of what we're talking about is in my book. These are things that if you're listening to this, you're like, this is interesting stuff. What the f does this have to do with my life?
Right.
How does this help me in my business? How does this help me get the partner that I want? How does it fix my relationships? This is my book. This is my little plug, but Awaken to Your True Self. So this is my book. If you want to know how to make all of this applicable and practical in a grounded way while still remaining in spiritual, in love and all of these things, that's what I talk about here. How do you actually discover your own victim mentality, the narcissism, the martyring? How do you meet your own needs without protecting yourself with armoring and not letting other people help you? How do you stop objectifying people? How do you get unstuck? The hero's journey. How do you live the heroic life rather than the avoidant life? How do you get out of your head and into your body and actually embody these principles rather than just talk about them? Everything we've talked about is literally part of my life's work. And in this book, it shows you how to practically apply this to your life. So I just want to kind of tidy that up with a bow there and say, if this has been fascinating, but you want to know how to actually use it, please check this out if it's interesting, because it will tell you how to practically do these things.
And that's available wherever books are sold. Yeah, of course.
Pretty much. Okay. There's an audiobook, Kindle, hardcover, and paperback.
Cool.
So Cinesomatics, basically, as I've explained before, in passing how it works, let's just start with the word that you did already, cinesomatics. Cine coming from video, but also a Greek of kina, which is movement. So we use video and movement. That's why it's cinema, right? It's moving pictures. So there's the movement piece, moving in your body, the somatic piece. So essentially we use video and movement in the body to reveal these things. Why? What? Nobody's really heard of this. This is actually something that I've been pioneering. I got a lot of some of the groundwork for this from my mentor. He worked in Hollywood, so there was a lot of innovation from him. He passed away, going to pass the torch to me. I created Cinesomatics. I took in work from Alan Watts, Joseph Campbell, all these different things in my life.
I was actually thinking about Alan Watts earlier. You said something, and I was thinking about the law of reversed effort, actually, as it applies to life.
Yeah.
That the way to have the richest life is not to cling too tightly to life.
Yeah.
So anyway, I heard Watts earlier in your work.
Well,
so
I'm actually an advisor at the Alan Watts organization. I work with a
interesting.
Yeah. We're doing all sorts of fun stuff, new video platforms, all sorts of things. Anyway. So I've sort of incorporated my own stuff. I brought it forward. I advanced the technology using high-end cinema equipment. And one of the big things has been the archetypes, somatic archetypes, which I'll talk about in a second. So, okay, so you understand the words, you get a kind of an idea of what we do, but why this? Like what? Why? It's based on the principle of as above, so below. Also, in common parlance, how you do one thing is how you do anything. How you do anything is how you do everything. And so what we find out is that the way you show up in your body, the way you move through the space, is how you show up in your life. It is how you move through the world. And so when people get on, it's not a session. I tell people, this is not a call. This is not a session. This is your life. How you're showing up here on this call is how you show up in your life. And so how people move in their body when they are doing whatever the exercise is reveals how they relate to those things symbolically in their own life. So rather than talking about things, right, if we had the discussion from before of, well, is your life about you or about other people? My life's about other people. Look at all the volunteering work. Look at all the stuff I do. Okay, great. Well, I guess you're right. Move on. Or maybe take a few years of therapy of talking about it to figure it out. Or in about 30 seconds, we can know with evidence on video in your own body which one you're doing. And so it's very confronting. This is not a beginner process. This is some of the most advanced work there is. And one of the reasons is because we essentially get a decade of spiritual transformation in about 6 months. It's very accelerated. Why? Because all of this is coming to the surface in your own body. All of the things that we've spent decades of our life not wanting to be true about us, suppressing, avoiding, censoring, avoiding. In this work, this stuff comes to the surface. Why? Not to make you feel bad about yourself, but to show you the truth. Right? So one of the principles at the end of the book, I have 5 guiding things. The biggest one is truth. I say make truth the most important thing in your life. Is it necessarily? It could be debated. Love and truth, kind of the same thing in a different sort of way. But what I found out is if I say make love the most important thing, people have a lot of distorted ideas around love.
Oh yeah, they'll go right to martyrdom sometimes.
Exactly. And so if I say make truth the most important thing, for most people, things get a lot more functional, right? Because what's the truth? Well, you tell somebody the truth. It might not feel good. They might not like it. But if you try to be loving, well, you might coddle them. You might be codependent. You might be rescuing them because of a distorted idea of love. Eventually, you find out that love really is truth and that telling the truth is the most loving thing you can do for someone. If you see somebody taking themselves out in so much suffering and they don't realize it, telling them the truth, saying, you know what, you're actually causing yourself harm. You think you're doing something good, but look, you can save their life. You can help them. So if you're in a relationship that's abusive or isn't true or authentic, telling them the truth is going to move you both forward. And so we do group work. When we do group work, this whole dynamic of there is, are you thinking you're loving them, or are you just rescuing this person? Or are you giving them feedback and telling them the truth? So there's this whole process of aligning to the truth, standing for this principle of truth. Through the movement of the body in the video, we can actually uncover that. So when you have a group of people or just a couple people in a video, the video has no distortions. When you look at a video of yourself, this is really what you're doing. Now, you have your own distortions. You have your limitations. You have filters. You have agendas. You have fears. You have things you're hiding, suppressing, things you don't even know about. You're projecting onto the world. This process helps you heal those, to stop those, to drop those. So it's not an additive process. I'm not teaching people how to add more confidence. I'm helping people subtract the insecurity. I'm not showing people how to be beautiful. I'm showing them how to stop suppressing their beauty. So it's a subtractive process rather than an additive process.
Would it be fair to say you're not showing people how to be more true, it's how to subtract the lie?
Exactly, right? You don't need to learn how to be you. You have to how to unlearn all of society's and your all of the stuff. It's a process of unlearning.
Yeah. You know what I want to comment on in your book is, because I have a book called Unlock Your Potential. And so your book, very, very similarly, could have been called Awaken Your True Self. But you said awaken.
It is awaken.
But you said awaken to your true self.
Yeah.
In other words, your true self isn't asleep.
Yeah.
It's already there. It's you that's asleep, and you need to wake up to it. It's not it that you need to wake up. It's a tiny 2-letter word that completely changes the meaning.
Yes.
And I love that. I think that's a really important distinction. I'm sitting here going, should I have called my book Unlock? Well, it wouldn't have made sense. Unlock to your true potential wouldn't have made grammatical sense. But it's like, it is a really subtle but really critical distinction. Yeah.
When people do this work, I say this in the book too, it takes it's a whole journey for people to get there. It has for me. There's a handful, and this could be a good place to tidy up. Because of everything that we're saying here, most people come into this work trying to fix themselves, to improve themselves. They get in that process, what tends to happen is that it gets wrapped up in a lot of fixing and narcissism. You see this in a lot of maybe spiritual communities, self-help communities, new age communities, this kind of thing that I've been all a part of, and I've done this all myself. So everything in this book, I've done something like it or it exactly in my book. That's how I wrote this stuff. I didn't just read other books and copy it. This stuff came from my own life experience. And one of those things is self-help, right? It's people focus on themselves. And so one of the big traps is it making it all about you. And so I developed a massive narcissism, not because I didn't like it, because I was just spending so much time trying to fix myself. Well, what's the fixing? What are you trying to fix? It's like, oh, okay, well, I'm fixing my whole life. When does it end? Well, what does that imply? So what happens is even if you do fix yourself, what does it at the end validate? It validates the lie you were broken to begin with. And so this is one of the big reasons why it's subtractive, why we don't fix. Yeah, there's healing, there's growth, there's learning, but it's not fixing. Because the more you fix yourself, the more it validates the lie you were broken to begin with. There was something wrong with you. And that's the true self. The true self, who you really are, there's nothing wrong with you. You have everything you need. You're enough, right? There's nothing wrong with you. And it's the process of not teaching you that or handing it to you. Say, no, Jeff, you are now not broken. You are now fixed. You are now perfect. No.
Well,
why?
And by the way, the word fixed, what does that word actually mean? Unchanging, rigid, locked? Mm-hmm. Fixed is the opposite of growth.
Yeah. Oh yeah, I like that.
Yeah, or I feel better because I got my fix. I mean, I just think truth is always buried in the words. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's an addiction, right? I got my self-help fix. Another thing, personal development, Most of the time, I call it persona development because you're just building a better persona. How can I present myself better to the world that's more lovable, likable, sellable, whatever it is? And so what ends up happening is people actually do all this work on themselves, and it takes them further from their true self, right? It takes you further from the truth of who you are. However, it doesn't invalidate it, because most people, what happens is they get to the end of that, they get to me and I say, there's nothing wrong with you. Stop fixing, right? What happens is they've just spent 30, 40 years of their life investing hundreds of thousands of dollars and hours to fix themselves, to improve their persona. And I say, you got to drop the persona. You got to drop the mess. That's not you. That's not who you really are. This is actually causing suffering. The more you do this, the more it takes you further from your truth. And to give all of that up, right? To give all of that up for the truth. It's been my experience, a lot of people aren't willing to do that. A lot of people aren't. You have to be willing to give it up. But what you understand is that whole journey wasn't pointless. You have to feel that. It's going to feel like that was so pointless. The thing is, it's not, because that got you here. That got you to the realization that there was nothing wrong with you to begin with. And if you look through the spirit...
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. I'm inspired.
Go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, like, when we this, to me, I actually feel like we're resolving the fundamental question that I asked, or I posed earlier, about to hero or not to hero, so to speak, right? Because a lot of it is we have this external definition of the hero, right? The hero is the guy that builds the big company, or the guy that creates the invention that moves technology forward, or the person that saves 300 people from a plane crash, or like, no, the hero is simply the person that braves the spiritual, psychological, emotional, and so forth elements, all the monsters and dragons of the journey into oneself, to ultimately, and then we talk about the road back, is the road back out into being fully ourselves. And the elixir was always our true self.
Yeah.
It wasn't something we went and got. It was something we went in and got and brought back up to the world. And that's where I'm like, I think that I'm so glad we arrived at this point, because like now I have peace. Like, yes, I can now say everybody is called, though not all heed the call, and not feel like I'm making a judgmental statement, or one that is perhaps circumstantially invalidated because it's like, oh, well, they didn't have the same advantages you did, so they never had a chance to go be a hero. No, we can all be a hero, because the dark night of the soul is in here, as is the elixir, and every one of us is called to go get it.
Yeah. I think there's a quote: everyone's called, few answer the call. And that's the thing. We all have the opportunity. It's all a choice. We are a choice away from life or death every moment. It's when you realize that, it's like, all right, well, what are you choosing? You're choosing one or the other. And as we talked about, maybe you think you're choosing one, but you might be choosing the other.
Yeah.
And so that's why the truth is so important. What is the truth? Are you fooling yourself? So many people, I was very intelligent. I was conning myself about everything. I remember being homeless and being like, abundance. I'm so dude, you can't, you're transferring 30 cents from one of your bank accounts to the other in order to afford a $1 can of soup. You are not in abundance. This is a complete fantasy. But I was unwilling to face that. I was unwilling to go in. And it wasn't until I was willing to go in on that journey and tell the truth that I could heal and overcome it. So, yeah, it's...
So to kind of bring all that to a close, I would say, and I don't want to speak for you, but if you're intrigued by this conversation and you would like to do a deeper dive to the inward hero's journey to find the truth and bring it back to the village, where should they go? AndrewDaniel.com, Cinesomatics.org. I know you have a number of locales.
Yeah, AndrewDaniel.org. If you go to AndrewDaniel.org, there's access to my book, the Cinesomatic website. There's some, if it's available, opportunities to do a Cinesomatic session. There's going to be group workshops, all sorts of stuff. So it's... And
Awaken to Your True Self, if they want to read the book.
Yep, the book. I actually highly recommend anybody who's that wants to do work with me to read the book. It is not a breeze. It's a big book, 432 pages, but I've not had anybody that said it didn't help them or change their life or have value. So if you like the stuff, check that out. And if you resonate with that, come do some work with us. Come play with us.
Oh man, what a great conversation, Andrew. I just want to say thank you. Thanks for what you do. Thanks for the stand, the proposal, the purpose that you are in the world. And thanks for being a guest on Unlock Your Potential.
Thank you. Likewise, this was such a fun conversation. And I appreciate all of your contributions. I learned a lot from this too. It's always fun to have a play off of each other. Everything that you said inspired me to have an idea, and I said I saw it for you. And so that's always one of my favorite ways to do this. So thank you for having me.
The challenge with conversations like that is when you're inspiring each other, it's like hard not to interrupt each other. I'm always like, oh, I got to say this, but also be a good host, So no, this was amazing. Thank you. Incredible having you as a guest. But I always have to say this to the audience, that you, the audience, are the best part of this show. You're why I do what I do every single time. So glad we got to spend this time together. Can't wait to see you on the next episode. Take care.
If you loved that episode, then you're definitely going to love this one. Check it out.
We're a sentient being, which means we think, we see, we smell, we feel. This mind is designed for strategy. It's not designed for reflection. It's not designed for abundance. You only get that by integrating heart, mind, body, soul, the human experience.